First thing I'm going to do, this is optional, not required, but I'm going to pour a little bit of vinegar into my water. And the reason I pour just a little bit of vinegar in there is because the acidity helps to make the clay a little bit stickier. It affects the sort of plasticity of the clay. Now I'm gonna also take a little chunk of clay and I'm gonna drop it in that water. That's gonna be used for sticking pieces together. I'll get to that later. I'm gonna take about a third of my clay and I'm gonna set aside that to use for the beak and the feet and other details for decoration. Now, with the big chunk, what I'm going to do is roll that into a ball. I wanna roll. I like to roll it between my hands. Some people like to roll it on the table. It's kind of whatever you prefer personally. It doesn't have to be a perfect sphere. It's okay if it's a little bit lumpy and not perfectly smooth, but we want to roll it into a nice big ball like that. The next step, after I've got a ball of clay, I'm going to make a pinch pot. And a pinch pot I make by sticking my thumb into the clay. That doesn't seem like it's done, does it? I think I need to do a little bit more to this because I don't want to have just like the world's biggest, heaviest, most awkward thumb ring. So what I'm going to do is pinch the sides of that. I turn, pinch, over and over. Or I might use my other hand to squeeze it down so that it gets taller and taller, with my thumb right in the middle, like making a clay cast for my thumb. By doing that, I'm gonna get something that is tall and skinny, kind of starting to get to be that penguin shape for the penguin's body, and it's hollow inside. The reason I want it to be hollow inside like that is so that it won't blow up in the kiln. And when I say blow up, I don't mean inflate like a balloon. I mean blow up like a bomb going off. The big thing that we have to worry about is if something is more than 2 inches thick, or you might say about 3 fingers thick, if it's this thick and solid all the way through, it might not dry out all the way through, and moisture trapped in the middle, water trapped in the middle, is going to turn to steam when it gets heated up in the kiln. And that steam is trying to expand and it builds pressure. And in that process, it builds up pressure from the inside out until finally there's so much pressure, it just shatters the sculpture in order for that steam to vent out. Clay needs to dry out before it goes through the kiln, and if it's too thick, sometimes the outside can look and feel dry while there's still moisture trapped inside. That's why we hollow it out. Now, I'm just using my thumb to smooth over a little bit of this surface. I'm not worried about it being perfect, but I'm going to make this sort of for my start. So now I've got the basic form, but it's not quite looking like a penguin yet. I need to start adding details to make it look more like a penguin. So the first thing I'm gonna do is give it a beak. Penguins need a beak. So I'm going to just roll my clay into a little ball. I took just a little chunk from here, roll it into a ball. I'm going to tap it against the table to make it flat on one side where it will connect. And then I pinch the other side to make it come to a point. I'm not worried about it being perfect quite yet because as I stick it on here, it's going to get pressed down and bent out of shape a little bit. Now to attach pieces, I need to wet both pieces. I scratch both pieces. The water makes it soft and sticky. Scratching creates loose edges that get tangled, kind of like Velcro. And then I stick them together, and as I do that, I twist it. I go like, see, you'll notice I twist it a little bit to get those two pieces tangled together. And I want to smooth over the cracks or the seams where those pieces are connected. I always remember slip, scratch, and smooth. Get it wet, scratch it, smooth over the seams. So it's got a beak, it's a good start. The next step, I'm gonna make eyes. So I'm gonna take just 2 little chunks of clay. Want to get them about the same size. It's okay if they're not perfectly the same. I'm going to roll it into a ball, press it flat, and I want to stick it on. The problem is if I just stick it on like this, it falls right off too easily. So I'm going to, again, slip, get it wet, scratch, and I'm going to stick them together. One thing that can be helpful, if you take a little bit of this clay that is just like soaked in the water, so it's like this mud, you can put that in between and that will help to sort of glue these pieces on. When I put that down, that works. I'm going to roll another little ball of clay, press it flat, scratch, scratch, and I'm gonna take just a little chunk of that mud to go in between. Stick that on. And one trick I have always found is helpful with the eyes is I poke in a hole where the pupils would go. It feels cruel poking my penguin in the eye, but it is helpful to add those little details. Now, penguins may be a flightless bird, but they still need their wings. So I'm gonna take 2 chunks of clay, again, about the same size. I'm gonna roll them. You'll notice I'm using the same strategy over and over. With most things, I'm kind of rolling a ball of clay, and then maybe I'm pressing it flat or pinching it to get it into a rough approximation of the size and shape that I need. So this feels about right. So a ball of clay, press that a little bit flat, pinch it, stretch it, get it into that sort of oval. I'm thinking of this almost like a cartoon version of a penguin. I'm using simple shapes to represent the different features. When I attach pieces, as always, I'm going to scratch to create loose edges that get tangled like Velcro. I'm gonna slip, get it a little bit wet, and I'm gonna add a little bit of this like muddy clay that I've got to glue those pieces on. And then I'm going to press and I twist it to get it tangled. And I smooth it over until those two become one. I want to smooth over those seams to make sure I don't see a crack or a division in between the 2 pieces anymore. And I can stretch it out as I do this. I want to smooth over the edges. I'm not worried about it being perfect right from the start. I might think about like the pose. Maybe I'm gonna have those wings out. Maybe it's gonna be up, down, whatever. But I'm going to make sure those pieces are attached just as my first step. Then I can worry more about refining details. The main thing is just getting these big features attached right from the start. Another big feature to attach are its feet. I'm gonna roll a ball of clay because that's what I pretty much always do. I'm going to flatten it. And in this case, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use my needle tool to just cut so I get 2 semicircles, and that will work really nicely for its feet. So I'm going to scratch both pieces. I'm gonna take a little bit of that muddy slip. It's starting to look like a pretty good penguin right now. I might also think about, do I want to use an additive method for some details or a subtractive method. An additive method is when I add pieces of clay. Like I could make a white belly here as an additive method, sticking a circle of clay on there. Another way I could make the belly stand out is a subtractive method where I scratch away a little bit by just etching a line with my needle tool. I want to be careful not to cut all the way through the clay, but I can use that needle tool to scratch a design into there as a subtractive method if I wanted to. The next thing I'm going to do is think about details that can make my penguin unique. Maybe I am going to make a bow tie for my penguin. Maybe mine's going to be a very fancy, formal sort of penguin with a bow tie like that. Or maybe it's going to have a bow in its hair. Or maybe I am going to make a crown to go on top of its head. Maybe mine is going to be the king or the queen, the prince or the princess of all the penguins. So I'm going to cut a sort of zigzag line here, and I'm going to make a crown to go on top of his head. There are lots of different things you could choose to do. Maybe I'm going to make mine a pirate penguin in an eye patch. So I'm going to roll a little ball of clay like this. I'm going to put that over one of his eyes. Actually, remember, to make it stick, I need to scratch, slip, stick that on. And of course, it's not going to look like a real eye patch unless it has that band that goes around it. So I'm going to take a nice long coil of clay. When we roll it out like a clay snake, we call that a coil. So I'm going to make a nice thin coil of clay that I can wrap around here for that. And this is just wet enough that I can get away with just adding a little bit of slip here and get it to stick on. Now in this case, what I'm going to do to make that eye patch stand out a little bit more is I'm going to etch a different texture. I'm going to etch a pattern on there. So I'm going to etch just some simple stripes, just so that it visually and texturally stands out from the other eye. Sort of calls attention to the fact something's different on this eye. And maybe my pirate penguin is going to be a musician. Maybe I'm going to have my pirate penguin playing a guitar. So I am going to make a guitar. I'm going to make a little coil for the neck of the guitar. I'm going to roll a ball of clay. I'm going to press that flat so it becomes an oval. I'm going to take that coil and I'm going to attach it to that oval. So I'm going to get a little bit of slip, that mud. I'm going to scratch this and I'm going to attach that. And in the first stages, I want to point out this does not look much like a guitar. I'm well aware of that. But it doesn't have to right from the start. I can carve away a little bit. I can then sort of press and pinch and get it into more of that guitar shape as I go. The more details I add, the more accurate it starts to look. So if I get this headstock right, that's going to be a little bit better. If I start to etch some strings on there, that's going to make it look a little bit better. Every detail that I take the time to add is going to make it look a little bit more accurate and more recognizable. So I've got 4 strings on there. That's probably all I have room for on this one. So mine, I guess, is a bass player. But when I add that on there, it's not perfect, but people will recognize that as a symbol of a guitar bass. When I scratch here, and I scratch the back here, I take a little bit of that muddy slip. I'm gonna stick that on. As I go, I'm always trying to refine it to make it more and more accurate. It's never gonna be perfect, but I always wanna do my best. So I think about what other details can I do, can I add to make it better, to make it stronger, and I wanna make mine unique. I wanna make mine stand out from everybody else's. So my pirate penguin playing a bass, I think is fairly unique. I like it, I'm happy with it, I'm proud of it. And now what I'm gonna do is look it over and just smooth over any cracks. As I dip my fingers in the water, it helps to smooth over cracks. It softens the clay a little bit. The trick is you don't wanna get it too wet, because if it gets too wet, it gets really muddy, it gets mushy and soggy, and it doesn't stay in its shape very well. So I just dip my fingers into the water to smooth over little cracks all around. Now, as a final step, I want to remind everybody that you are not the only person who is making a penguin. A lot of students at Highlands are participating in this project. I think I had about 70 people sign up to do this project, which means there are gonna be about 70 different penguins. And as much as we try to make our work unique, it's good to make sure that we sign our name or put our initials on our work somewhere so that we will know it is ours. I might write my initials K, because my first name is Kyle. You can call me Mr., but my actual first name is Kyle. So K for Kyle, and then W. So I've got my initials on there, nicely etched, so I can read it and I know this is my work. You might ask a grown-up to help you to etch your name or initials in your work as that final step when you're finished, to make sure we know whose is whose. After that, you're just gonna set it aside, let it dry out, and remember, as the clay dries out, it can be very delicate. So you just wanna set it aside, let it be. Don't do anything to it until you drop it off and go through the kiln, and then you can paint it after it goes through the kiln. Do not try to paint it before it goes through the kiln. The paint will burn off.